Nice to meet you
So,
too. Yeah, I was
so
listening to the last caller, and I have to say, a lot of it went over my head. So
that's totally fine.
I'm
A lot of it went
yeah,
over my
I'm
head.
going to be a little bit of an easier person to talk to. No
Good.
offense to
We
the other
all need a
guy, he's
break,
just really, really
probably.
smart. Yeah. Um. Well, I guess I wanted to talk about free will. I did look you up, and I saw that um you do stuff with like depression and
Mhm.
therapy and
Yeah.
philosophy, right? Okay. So
Yep.
I'm struggling to figure out um how like psychology works or therapy works if we don't have free will.
Yeah. That's a really interesting point. Yeah. So I'll say this. There's actually this really big meta study that's let me mute you real quick if I can do that. Yeah. There's actually a really big meta study that was done, I think, in like 2018, 2015, something around this time. That a meta study is not a study that's actually done on participants. It's a study that's done on other studies. So it was just like a, hey, let's categorize and catalog all the findings, and that's what their aim was. And their aim was in order to find out based on the model of depression that you were doing, like because there are different models based on the model of depression that you were assuming in this particular study, whatever the studies they were, what was the outcome of how people felt about their treatment and their prognosis and so on. Um, so, like I said, there's different models of depression, and they really break down into just two. Then this gets to your question about free will. The most dominant model of depression is the biochemical physical model of depression. It's the one where people can say, yeah, of course, it's just chemical imbalance. It's just that's all. You have no control of it. The other major division would be like you have a little bit of control of it. These would be like, so the first category would be biochemical physical. The second category would include models like psychological model, the social models of depression, religious, spiritual models of depression. And so on those models, you tend to see more what's called agential freedom. That is, like you have more control uh, over the outcome. So they found in their findings, they said that when it came down to their prognosis, people who were using in the studies that use the biochemical physical models, they were more negative about their prognosis because that model just has has the has the benefit of like, okay, I just inherited it. It's not anything I have control over. It's just my biology after all. It's like, if you were born without a limb or something, right? There's nothing you can change, right? I've got a myself like a herniated disc, I have to deal with. And it's not my fault because I inherited it. So if depression is like that, you get the benefit of it not being your fault. You're not culpable for it. But the disadvantage is that you can't change it either. It's not.
Yeah.
Sorry,
So
you're reading yourself. Go ahead.
yeah,
Do
I
you
have
want
a
to go ahead and say?
question. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah,
if
please go ahead.
I'm curious, like, what's your view on free will? Because I'm more of the mindset like free will doesn't exist, so I'm not sure like how one could even
Mhm.
like have control over their own thoughts. It seems like the thoughts happen before I could think them. Like
Yeah. So
if I had free will, then I would like wouldn't I need to know what thoughts I'm going to think next before I think them?
no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So my view of free will is that I'm a libertarian, but I'm not a radical libertarian. So I've said this before, but like think of it as like a spectrum. Like on one radical side is radical libertarianism. Like you have extreme free will. There's no influences on you whatsoever. I'm not that radical. The other side would be extreme radical hard determinism, and where you have no control over your choices whatsoever. It's just you're part of the physical chain of cause and events. Um, I'm somewhere in between, and I'm a lot closer to libertarianism. I think that you do have free will, but I also think that certain things influence you, like your own habits. Like, so I've got ADHD and I can't really
Right.
think well a lot of times, you know, I build up habits that make me a better thinker or worse.
So how can we like influence our brain to do something like if our thoughts originate in the brain, like how
Mhm.
can like I don't understand the mechanism for like how this like immaterial mind like can tell like the physical brain what to do or how to think. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think you're describing there the problem of interactionism.
Okay.
Um, the idea that the physical world can't interact with the non-physical world.
Hmm.
That would be the name of it in philosophy and the philosophy of mind as well. The interaction problem. So uh, I I I can sympathize with the strength of that concern. Like, why would you think physical things can interact with non-physical things? But I was just actually I'll pull this up because I was just looking at a rejoinder to this. I have it right here. I have it pulled up. So this I'll tell you about the book here here in a sec, so I don't lose my thought here. Okay, so it also gives in terms of like causal closure. That's a term that's used in philosophy of mind, which means that the physical world is closed and that only physical things happen, chain of causes and events, all that happens in the physical world. Why would you need something that's external to the physical world to interact? It just couldn't possibly interact. Uh, and there's an idea here that the causal, so there's a weak version and a strong version. The strong version says that a physical event the weak version says the physical event is necessary for the non-physical event. So the physical event of like my neurons firing is necessary for the non-physical event of my thoughts, my ideas. That strong version says that the physical event is sufficient for uh, the causation of the non-physical event. And so I don't. So this book is saying, well, look, the weak causal closure principle is a lot more plausible than the strong closure. Just to repeat them again, the weak causal closure principle is the idea that something would be necessary. So it's fine if you want to say that ideas depend on my neurons. That's cool. There's no problem with that. But the stronger one would say something like, you know, only thing that's happening around here is my neurons and not sufficient to explain everything. We don't even need to make reference to non-physical things like ideas or thoughts or anything like that. It's just brain chemistry. And that one is a much less plausible thesis to hold, according to this book. So,
What book is that? And
yeah,
can
so
you just explain why that's less plausible? Because
yeah,
I'm
so
struggling there. Yeah.
this is the waning of materialism. And it's actually a collection. It's a volume of papers by, I've mentioned this in a few of my comments, by 23 philosophers, Oxford University Press, I think came out in 2010, 2012. Uh, they all express this dissatisfaction or rejection of materialism, this idea that we're just matter. And so if you have materialism, a very strong materialism, you're not going to get things like free will. So can I ask, like, what is it that's driving the hard determinism with respect to free will? Why, in other words, why do you think you don't have free will? Is there
Uh,
something like a prior
no,
prior
I mean,
theory
I
that's
just don't see how, um, I don't see myself or just anybody else for that matter, like really being in control of their own actions. I believe that like we're all a product of our conditioning and like our genetics and our hormone levels. I mean, somebody like Phineas Gage, for instance, in the 1800s,
yeah.
that got his personality changed because he had the iron rod go through his
Mhm.
skull. Like something like that goes to show me, like, wow, well, my a personality, something that you would consider to be like in your own dominion, like in your own control, can actually has nothing to do with like your own control. It's just, I guess, I, a result of like how the brain has like organized itself, or like whatever kind of conditioning or environment that you're in, or even hormone levels. I mean, we see like with
Yeah.
Ozempic and Manjaro and these other like GLP drugs right now, that people's impulsivity are going down. Like people that were like once addicted to like gambling or alcohol, like or have taken these drugs for other reasons, maybe to lose weight or maybe for diabetes, and now they found that that has an effect on their impulsiveness when it
Yeah.
comes to other areas of life. Now, I used Manjaro myself, and I noticed the effect that it had on me, and I recognized that I don't think that the willpower argument when it comes to like food behaviors is as strong as it once was. Because I do know that like I take this drug and I feel completely different. Like I don't have um, the same kind of like impulsive decision making that I had before. Um, and so I guess that's my experience.
Yeah.
And
So
maybe I'm wrong about it, but that's where I'm
yeah.
at.
So I appreciate that. So that's a helpful explanation. But I think all those things you said are consistent if you have free will. So, like a Christian theist, as such, which I am, I'm a Catholic, can easily find this consistent with their own view. So, like the idea is that again, the the mental is. I'm sorry. I'm just gonna. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. All right. So the idea is that, say, take Phineas Gage. You got the rod through his head. Uh, that's fine. It's not enough evidence. It's underdetermined, is what I'm saying. So it's consistent with a deterministic view, which says, oh, we just are our brains and we have no free will, and so on and so on. Not that just our brains is a determinist view, just to be clear for everyone in the comments, but that we have no free will, therefore. And it's also consistent with the fact that we do have free will. The idea that we are not just our brains, we maybe have a soul plopped into our body, So this is what the Christian theist would think. You do have a soul. And how would they explain that if you get your brain messed with, or you take, these drugs or something and they mess with? Well, because it's the same idea as like hardware and software. Like just because that you change the hardware and it changes the software, that does not entail that somehow now the hardware and software are identical, and it doesn't entail that the hardware exists only and that the software doesn't exist. You actually can still account for it. Like you change the hardware, you would expect the software to change. So if something happens to my brain, such that I become injured or I take drugs or something, and I have different things happening in my thoughts and in my mind, that's to be expected. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but you kind of lost me when it came to the soul because
Mm.
I'm struggling to understand what that even is. Because it seems
Yeah.
like historically the soul would be described as like well, I guess what we consider today like some kind of like life force, maybe. That's at least how I think the Greeks understood it. Like all living
Yeah, they
things
did.
had a
Yeah.
soul, and then like human beings had like a special category of soul because we were rational,
Mhm.
right? I
Exactly.
just I don't see any proof of that. I mean, it's different than the mind. Like I have an easier time accepting that we have a mind because I experience things. I could, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
when it comes to the
Okay.
soul,
Yeah.
it just seems like that's just another word for life. So I don't understand what really
Got
the
you.
soul is, or how would a soul even be able to like I don't know exist after one dies, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. So to your point, yes, the original Greeks did think that it was just a life force in the sense that the Greek word for soul just is anima, which means whatever it is that animates, right? Or so it's a thing that's animated already or moves about, like an animal. So, but we can bracket all those um, considerations about whether the soul is eternal, whether there's religious concepts tied to the soul. I think we could all agree that the soul, just whatever it happens to be, is that thing that animates the body, and while it's alive, and then when the body is dead, well, the thing that animates the body is no longer present because the body's not moving anymore. Does that make sense? So, like, I think we could all agree, just like if we bracket away. I mean, we could get into conversations about why I think that it's like the religious concept is right. Um, but I think that the Greeks were onto something, that there is something there. And they probably would just say, yeah, it's something like the mind, like the psyche. Yeah. I mean, it's
Okay,
not great.
so
The
how
mind
does
is part
the
of the
soul
soul.
exist after we die? Like I guess that's what I'm trying to get to know.
Well,
Like
that would be
later on.
an additional thing. Yeah, that gets into like philosophy of religion. And for that, you can't, I don't think you can get there if you're thinking like, where do I go in this maze to get to that point? I don't think that you can get there by going from, hey, the soul is a plausible thing, because the ancient Greeks talked about things that move the body, to now it's got to be a religious thing. I think you would have to take additional, side journeys and think about the plausibility of God's existence, the plausibility of a certain religion being the one that is true over all others, to the exclusion of all others, and then based on what those religions say about the soul, and of course that would be like what Christians could refer to as like particular or special revelation, as opposed to general revelation. I don't know if you get there through general revelation, through reason, that is. I think you get there through um, yeah, but I will say this: I just remembered Plato did have an argument for the eternality of the soul. He thought that it was eternal; it was neither created and it can't be destroyed after your death. I can't remember if somebody, excuse me, maybe wants to Google that. It's in one of his dialogues. I can't remember which. If so, you can just plop it in the comments. Uh, I think it might have been in the Phaedo.
Yeah, see, here's the thing is that I like would like to believe this. Like very much so. I used to be a Catholic myself. I no longer
Yeah,
like really believe in anything. I just I don't really believe in the soul or the afterlife or anything supernatural. To be honest, I just think like this stuff is kind of wishful thinking, or just like our way of um coming to grips with the fact that we're all going to die,
mhm.
and or how we can grieve, and wish that we see our loved ones again. And I'm not trying to like diminish somebody's experience by like I'm not poking fun of that at all. Like because I used to
Yeah,
believe,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
but I just don't find any like hard evidence for like the I do want to believe, but
mhm.
I just have no evidence for the existence of anything immaterial. I mean, other than, I guess, just my own experiences.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot you said there. So um, yeah, first of all, I appreciate the attitude with respect to it. It's like this is one thing that I use to check a person's motivation and like why they're thinking about these things to begin with, is that the idea of like, if it were true, let's just suppose it's true, would you want it to be true? And you seem to say, yeah, yeah, I think that's a good attitude to have with respect to it. Not to say that I wish and I hope, and not to say that wishful thinking or something, but like, if something is true, I want to know the truth. Like that reveals a lot about my attitude. Like it would be it would be weird if I said, if it were true, I would not want it to be true. That's a weird position to take. So I think that many people do take that. I'm glad you don't, uh, because it reveals something deeper. It's like I reject this on this and this. Like it seems something emotional more than like a desire to know what's true. If something's true, I want to know if it's true. Uh, yeah, and then you said something else about the material there. Just get back to that conversation. Uh, you, s- I think we do have evidence for the immaterial, just the immaterial, not the supernatural. That would be a thing that is immaterial, but there are immaterial things that aren't supernatural. And I think like numbers, mathematical objects, abstract objects like propositions, uh, anything yeah, the idea of evil, morality, the idea of the soul, if you think about that, or even this thing you call the life force, consciousness, so on and so on. These are all things that, many people have said that one thing here or there are material, but it's
Right.
really hard to explain how each thing is material. Like numbers, for example, why are they material? You
But
know what
I
I mean?
mean,
Like
didn't
they
we
don't seem
just
to be made of
create
matter.
numbers in the same
No,
way that we created language? I mean,
no, no. Numbers so we might have created language, but we did not create, say, the logic behind language. For example, like the logical rules. Like, man, if I had my iPad working here, I was trying to troubleshoot it before this talk, and in which case I could just like, dabby some things on there. But like the law of non-contradiction, for example, or the law of excluded middle. The law of excluded middle says either A or not A. And the law of non-contradiction says it's not the case that both A and not A can both be true at the same time. Like it's just logical contradiction. Those logical rules, I know I'm talking about logical stuff now, not mathematical stuff. but they're the same. They're the same. Logical rules, they can be known with certainty, just like mathematical truths can be known with certainty, and they're not invented. We find them in nature, but that's the thing. We found them.
Oh,
We
yeah, yeah. I'm
observed
not.
them.
I wasn't saying that we invented like
Mhm.
logic itself. I'm saying that
Right.
like numbers don't they just represent like
Now, the symbols for numbers we did invent, like Roman numerals, Arabic numerals.
I
Yeah,
see what
we
you're saying.
invented those
Okay,
symbols, but we didn't invent the actual,
I see what you're saying.
uh,
Um,
like,
what
yeah.
about justice though and morality? See, I went to law school. I'm a lawyer in Florida, and I just man, the more I practice, the more I just think like, hey, these laws really have no basis in like objective morality or anything. We just kind of she seems like it's up to the whim of like whoever voted it in,
Mm,
and they don't even have like a basis for it oftentimes. Or like I just see like how the law is applied differently in different circumstances because of different judge, you know,
yeah,
or maybe
yeah,
or sometimes it's like the wealth of the client or the race of the
yeah,
client or the you know what I mean, or
yeah.
the gender of the
What
client
kind of
really.
what kind of
Uh,
what kind of law do you do?
criminal defense, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Um, and so I just think like if like I think the strongest argument for like objective morality would probably be like, well, for instance, when a parent has a child, like we have like certain hormones that prevent us from finding
Mm,
that child to be like um like sexually attracted to that child. And
right.
so like I guess like biologically there's a reason why we would come up with a law that prevents incest, right?
Mm,
And I would say like that's maybe the strongest case I could make for something like an objective morality. But like other than that, I just feel like we just made these rules up. Um, maybe just to have social order, you know? And 200 years ago, I mean, we could have a discussion about slavery in America.
mhm,
And
mhm.
depending on you living in the North or the South, I mean, we would come up with different conclusions. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So let me see this hot take here. I don't think that if you don't believe, look, I think you have a hard time if you want to say that morals are constructed. I think you have a hard time of saying that something like incest is morally wrong. But that's my hot take. Like, take, did you know right now in Utah, it's legal to marry your first cousin if you're both over the age of 65 and you can't procreate? So, like, the idea here is like, because laws are interesting. Like, if you want to learn more about laws, especially from a philosophical perspective, I'd recommend, highly recommend, it's hard to read, but highly recommend Aquinas's treatise on law. It takes it from a Summa Theologiae,
Right.
but yeah,
I'm familiar with Aquinas. Like I said, used to be Catholic, and I
yeah,
haven't read
yeah,
that in particular, but I read
that
like some of
that stuff blew
Aquinas.
my mind. I wasn't even into law or political philosophy whatsoever. I was like, nah, I don't care for this. And now I teach it in every class that I can possibly teach in because it's so fascinating. Sorry. Yeah. So to get back to the incest example, so I think that laws get made for the primary purpose of not harming another person. I think that if you take away that condition of, hey, at least I'm not going to harm this person, like that's what they did in the case of the Utah law. They said, okay, we will remove the condition, the one thing that usually causes harm, and that's procreation. So if we remove that, but if you remove that, what recourse do you have to say that incest is wrong? And I don't know where he went, but we'll get another caller here and soon. But he suggested that maybe it's through hormones and so on. But what if I'm attracted to those hormones? What if, like, I mean, disgust is a sometimes good indicator of what's morally good and what's morally bad. But people have fetishes, What if they're like, no, I like disgust, What if and it's not a reliable indicator. Say if you're pro LGBT and, you will say, well, people are disgusted by this LGBT stuff, but that doesn't mean that it's morally bad, So disgust is not always a reliable indicator. There have been some people who written up, even a colleague of mine called Sabrina Little, who has written on this topic. But anyway, um, if you wanted to strengthen and extend that example of the cousins in Utah marrying, let's keep the condition of not procreating. So suppose we made it even stronger. We said, take a brother and sister, right? And make sure that they're both fixed. They're in their 20s. They could have children, but we're going to make it such that they won't have children, right? Maybe just use, I don't know, prophylactic every time so that you don't. That you have a really hard time with saying why that's morally wrong because they're not hurting anybody.